I'm excited about today's chat because the journey that's often not spoken about, we use the word creative in a lot of different ways, right? But sometimes we've kind of taken it out of what it actually is in different worlds, and especially now where we're redefining how and why we kind of connect with our audiences, deeper levels and everything like that. So, especially in an age where creativity and creative has a myriad of meanings. Excited to demystify some of this role. So I want to introduce Jenny. If you can tell us a little bit about your background, yourself, and start there.
Sure. Hello. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here with you all today. Jenny Zirinsky. I'm SVP Global Marketing, Communications, and Media Transformation at Colgate-Palmolive. I've been with Colgate for just over 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent many years in the beauty industry, Shiseido, Coty, Estee Lauder companies. And prior to that, agency side, digital media in both the US and Europe. So I think that's probably enough. Don't want to bore anyone.
Sure. So what does creativity mean in the context of modern marketing, and why is it important now more than ever?
I think creativity is so subjective. It's hard to really pinpoint it, I guess. But I think it's hugely important, right? It relates back to storytelling, it relates back to communications, it relates back to how we start to position ourselves as brands in order to get the best response emotionally and hopefully financially from our customers and consumers. So it's hugely important, and I don't think the importance of creativity has diminished over time. If anything, I think it's increased. I think we have many more opportunities to be creative with our consumers, with our messages. We have different channels now, we have different ways of communicating, there are different opportunities, times, places, and I think the creativity has actually just been, the opportunities for creativity have improved and have multiplied based on data and what the data gives us.
And when we talk about creativity, there's different areas that we can go to think about how do we set up something simple as a media campaign, right? Is it to get creative in setting up a taxonomy, or the seamless fusion of data, compelling content, creative assets is also another side of the world. Both equally as important on that side. So, but I want to focus a little bit more on the creative assets and also the content, and kind of really discuss how has that process changed now with the amount of data and the fragmentation that also exists in the ecosystem.
It's a loaded question. I think it's changed tremendously and in many different ways. So on the one hand, the process, right? Think about the process. It's no longer as linear as it used to be, where I think we started with a concept, you might test the concept, you'd storyboard it, you'd create a creative, you might do pre-flight, you might do in-flight, but you put it out to market, to the masses. And for the most part, it would probably resonate because I think historically creativity for advertising has really been reduced down to a baseline of what will resonate with the most people. And so it gets watered down, but it also appeals to very broad masses. And so that process, I've kind of talked about two things there, right? The linear component of the process of creating creative and assets is now circular because it gets infused by data, because we have the opportunity through real-time feedback, data, and insights to optimize creative in flight. So the process is more circular now, no longer linear. But I think also the messages and the opportunity for messaging has become much more nuanced because we are able to go from what used to be one to mass. There was the promise once of one-to-one. With data, privacy regulations, I think that's no longer necessarily compelling as it used to be, but I think the sweet spot is the one-to-many. So you have segments of audiences, and you can communicate differently to them with a message that will resonate, that's not watered down because it's for the masses. It's a little bit more hitting and relevant because it's to a few.
So like also the one-to-many, when we think about it, you almost have to start, in a way, human connections, humanizing the relationships. And how does that stronger, how do you build those stronger human connections with the audiences, but also where do you kind of get that data to kind of drive that? Because creatives themselves don't have that information, right?
Yeah, I think there's two things there, right? So first, you have to drive the relevance. where I think we used to live in a very transactional world with our creative, right? It was move it through the funnel. So get your awareness, get your consideration, now buy the product, and then let us remind you why you love our product and why you bought it in the first place and hope that you buy more. And so it's less transactional now because we can break it down by audience segments. We can think about what resonates with each audience. We can find the USP, however you want to describe it, that resonates to certain specific people. And we can still move them through the funnel, yes, but we can also move past the transactional relationship with them and move into something a little bit deeper. So I think that's one part of it. The second part, I think, is in how we find that data you had asked. And that's tricky. I think the way that I like to think about it is in terms of content, context, and communities. So the community is the many, it's our audiences. And we have to think about the audiences. And in a large corporation like ours anyway, I think we have a legacy of creating brand segments. So we have brand teams that go and they create these profiles or personas of people. You're probably all familiar with this, right? You have the lady between the ages of 35 to 52 who likes yoga, eats healthy, and has 1.2 kids. But then we think about how do you buy that audience? And then you start to have to sort of translate it almost. So we've gone through actually at Colgate a huge process of understanding how to really take data, 1P, 2P, 3P data, and really understand how we translate segments into viable audiences. And then how we put the relevant content against that. And then the third component is the context. So you have your communities, you have your content that resonates with the community, and then you reach them in the right context. And that's supposed to both be physical context of where the ad is and the message are appearing themselves, but it's also a mental context for the consumer. So where are they in the purchase cycle? Did they just go to the dentist and realize that they have sensitive teeth and lots of cavities? Or do they just bring their dog into the vet and realize that he's overweight and they need to give him better food? Or are they trying to teach their toddler how to brush better? Where are they mentally in their journey, and how do we create the right context for them within the content?
And that's how you would imagine it would work, but at times also, as you said earlier, privacy regulations, right? Data is getting harder and harder, good data to come by, especially when Google inevitably will get rid of the cookie. That's going to also throw everyone in a bind. And it's, Colgate is not always in the retail transaction, right, in front of the consumer, like a D2C company. So what do you guys do that can actually get some of that data to understand more about those audiences? How do you stay in line with them?
So there's a couple of components there. I think your point about the retailer is absolutely correct, right? Majority of our business is very much through third-party retailers, increasingly e-commerce retailers as well as brick and mortar, but still, we're not necessarily D2C. So we have to create those close relationships with our customers. And we have a whole global customer development team who increasingly our marketing teams are working more closely with. When you think about retail media, right, that's huge for us. It starts to really bridge the gap, and we're seeing an increase in our spend go from traditional media through to retail media. When I say traditional, I mean traditional digital as well, of course. So one of the things that it does for us is it starts to break down the silos in the organization, and we start to think more holistically about the consumer journey. Right? The consumer doesn't care if they're on a Walmart.com page, or if they're on an Amazon page, or if they're on the news site. Right? It's about where they are contextually in their journey, and how we talk to them where they are and when they are. And so we have to then use that information that we were able to get to have those relationships with our retailers to encourage them to have that data facilitation, data exchange with us. So that we can say, look, we can start to prove the case. Not only will we buy your retail media, yes, we will, of course, and that's huge for them, but we can also start to prove a value back to them. If you can provide us this data, we can put it into our systems. We could start to really look at the audiences. We could start to drive that data-driven messaging, and through the geo graph and the location base, we can start to understand who is the Walmart buyer versus the Target buyer versus anything grocery, and we can start to push people into the right directions. And if we can start to prove that case, and we're starting to slowly, and different countries are in different places with different retailers, some I will say are more willing than others. But as we start to prove that case out, we find their willingness to open up that data bank to us starts to increase.
And when we talked about data, we talked about the media side, but then how do you kind of measure that creative impact with all this? How do you tie it, when it comes to tying it together, or bring it in, how are you prioritizing that, or I guess investing in that area? Because a lot of times when we talk about investments, we all talk about, oh, we need a CDP, we need to get access to second-party data, we need publisher integrations. It's all about data, and it's not about some of the other things you've already been doing on the creative side. So I'm curious.
Yeah, it's interesting. That point about data, right? We talk about a lot of data. We're trying to move away from talking about data and talking about more signals, but that can be challenging at times. And obviously the fidelity of the signals can get very convoluted. So when we think about data, one way that we like to talk about it is we talk about historically, you think back to the early days of digital, right? When you could run your campaigns, you get your double-click trafficking reports, there's some data in there. You can optimize a little bit. The data was sort of the sprinkles on the marketing cupcake. And increasingly, we've gotten to a point where we want our sprinkles in the cupcake. We think about those confetti cake pop things, the sprinkles embedded in. We want the data in the marketing process the whole way through. And we're starting to make those strides, and I think a lot of companies are starting to see that as well. So when we think about how that relates to creative assets and creativity, we can start to see that we are fusing the data to fuel the consumer insights. We can start there, right? It's no longer about the gut instinct of, I really feel like this is going to work because I like it. That sample size of one, we're now really being able to say, we see the data of the historical campaigns and messaging. We have real-time consumer insights that we can get by overlaying various data sources, retail data, our own 1P data, Google search data. We can really start to get a good picture of the consumer now, and that data can then start to drive our media and our placements, as well as the messaging and creativity. Now, how we measure that on the back end starts to get a little more complex. We have our more traditional ways of measuring creative. We can look at brand index scores. We can look at MMMs. We can all of that kind of stuff. We've also looked at a way where we get a little bit more of an immediate impact on measurement. We're working with a platform called CreativeX. I don't know if any of you know them. I'm a huge fan of theirs. They're really starting to put data and measurement against creative and creativity. And we've come up with our own set of what we call creative golden rules. These are things that we know work. We have codified them, we've put them into the system, and now we can start to say, before an asset even goes into the market, is it red or green? Will it pass or yellow? Will it pass on red or not? And if it's red, it goes right back to the drawing board and they fix it. If it's green, it goes ahead. And we can start to put measurement against it. And by doing that, we not only start to see our gains in efficiency and effectiveness, but we also then start to see the waste avoidance and how much we can then reinvest as a result. So we are starting to put real clear business metrics against creativity.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but have you seen an issue where you thought there was waste on a campaign until you looked at the creative side of the data, and you realize it's not actually waste, it's actually still resonating with the audience because of some other KPIs? Or not so much that, but more so it's helping you find areas of opportunity in addition to.
I would say areas of opportunity, yes. And I think that's one of the exciting things about data, right? And I talked a little bit about how it's moved from a linear process to a more circular process. I'll give you an example. We launched a product, a Colgate toothpaste product in Asia. It was our O2 product, so it has an oxygenation in it that whitens the teeth. And we had done all the research previously. We knew that the oxygenation claim was resonating with consumers. So we went to market with an oxygenation claim. What we found after launching was that as people were using the product, they found that the oxygenation, which creates little bubbles, so we went out there with a claim of oxygenation, the effervescence, like the bubbles that get created as you're brushing. And the feedback from consumers in real time was actually it creates this really interesting warming sensation in the mouth. And they all talked about it. They loved it. It was, what really stood out. And so right away, we changed our messaging to be about the warming sensation. We looked at the reviews, we looked at the social, we looked at what was coming back from surveys and panels and things like that, but also the real-time, scraped off the internet data that all spoke to warming sensation. And, of course, the whitening results as well. And so we put that back into the copy and the creative and went even broader with the campaign, and it just continued to increase.
Data-driven creativity, everyone. What are some of the challenges that you've come across, or rather the pitfalls or anything like that, when you're trying to merge data and creative together, right? Not just technical challenges, but maybe because sometimes creatives on a different side of the world than the actual data?
I think that the challenges are real. They're still there. And I would say one of the first challenges is, and I think everyone has this, it's not even just a creative thing or a media people thing. I think the first thing you want to do is judge something, the potential efficacy of something for yourself. I like it, I don't like it. That makes me laugh, it doesn't make me laugh. It makes me cry, I think it's sappy, right? You kind of want to take that and put your own brand on it. And so one of the hardest things I think we have to do is really start to question our own gut instincts and our own intuition to say, okay, why do I think that? Why do I feel that? And what does the data say? And if that's what you think, then the way we like to talk about it is, okay, if that's the hypothesis, I think it's too sappy, it's not going to relate to anybody. Yes, it's a tearjerker, but it will maybe make 5% of the population cry, and they're not our target audience, right? So you come up with the hypothesis, and then we put target and we test it in a controlled environment. So does that resonate? Okay, you were right. Or you know what? Actually, they love it. So they're eating it up. Let's go with it.
There. And then how do you kind of all these kind of insights that are coming out, especially when you put the two together, can create almost a very deep amount of optimizations or ways to execute, right? Like what was just one thing that turned into 5 or 10 or 20 or more for a group of audiences and cohorts. How do you kind of take that process and implement that too? Because that's a big challenge on that side, right?
It is. And I think to some degree there is a limit. I mean, we haven't necessarily found the limit in terms of putting a cap on it, but you can quickly get into a situation where you have thousands of creatives. And that's not really helpful because then that becomes really hard to measure and optimize against. So I think that you need to be sort of balanced in the approach and thinking about your audience segments and what will resonate with them. And I think we like to try to think about it in a scientific manner. So we have a set of creative, let's put it to market, let's test it, let's see what resonates, let's optimize against that versus just letting it go all out and crazy. The second part of it I will say, which certainly we've struggled with, is as you start to get into sewing and stitching the data with the audiences, with the audience research, with the various data points, with the DCO, with the data llama, with the Google, trying to pull it all together into a campaign view because theoretically you can create these assets across campaigns. One of the killers is taxonomy. And I will say we have a phrase now that there are 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and taxonomy. Because it really will kill you. And it just, you have to get it right and you have to identify the solution early on. I will say that's something that tripped us up for a long time because we're trying to look at it like Colgate is a global brand. We try to look at it also at a global level as well as the geographically regional level as well as a local market level. And if we're not all using the same taxonomy, because certainly everyone's going to be using slightly different tools, then where it comes all together, it just gets out of control and you can't really get a holistic view of anything to know what works, what doesn't work, what audiences are resonating with which types of creative, what is, how do we take those insights and feed them back into product development if we don't understand what they are, and that all comes down to the taxonomy.
Yeah, taxonomy is definitely a big important piece, partly because also I think there's such fragmentation in the ecosystem that they don't really talk to each other, and the easiest way is to sort of repeat the taxonomy. So going a little bit off of that is, are you, one of the big questions that we always talk about in the industry is around who's controlling this? Is this something that your teams are doing in-house or working with partners, or is it a mixture of both? Like how would marketers today, if they wanted to kind of go on this, execute on it?
For us, it's both. And it's been a journey. I would say we started completely outsourced. Everything was with the agency. I don't necessarily think that we want to get to a place where it's fully in-house. I don't know that we have the real capability for that, and I don't know that that's an area where we want to invest in order to bring that full capability in-house. And there's a lot of arguments for the pros and cons of in-house versus outsourced. But for us, it's a mix. And what we've had to do is take all of these areas, the data excellence and execution, the media, the creativity, the creative throughout the funnel, whether it's retail media to media, search, CTV, et cetera. You take all of those channels and you look at them, you look at the process, and you look at what's needed to get from here to ideal state. And then we have to figure out around the people, the process, and the technology, what stays in and what gets outsourced. And that has been, we still go through it. Anytime something new comes up, we look at it. Should we be doing this in-house? Should we be outsourcing it? What are the pros and cons of each? And what is the financial implications?
And then also, how do you kind of scale this out as time goes on? And that's
Yes,
the big piece, right?
scaling is incredibly
So, I think we have, about 5 minutes left? I'm gonna ask just,
important.
it did. How can marketers today kind of use this? What kind of, timeline or process would you give them if they wanted to go and say, like, listen, we got our PII data, we know who our audiences are, we buy third-party data, we have a whole process there. We get access to media data, but how about the creative side? How would they go about kind of acting? What tips would you give them? Where to start?
I would say it's a process. So what is your ideal state? Where do you want to get to? And first of all, what's the reason? Why are you doing this? Why are you embarking on this journey? And I'm sure there's a really good reason, but it's probably not the same for everybody. So what is your end state goal? What are you trying to achieve? And what does that desired end state look like? And then where are you today and how do you get there? Now I will say, for us, I've been with Colgate for 2 years now. It started before I got there. We're still on this journey. It is a multi-year journey to sort of, at least for an organization like ours, which is large and filled with legacy, to put it nicely. And it takes time to turn these things around and to change perceptions and to bring in new technologies and new ways of thinking. And so for us, it's a multi-year journey. Now that said, most organizations will not withstand an investment of millions and millions and millions of dollars over years and years and years and years. So you also have to then identify what are the quick wins. What can I start doing today to show growth, to show traction and transition and movement towards that end state? And I think that's one of the hardest parts, is to lay out that journey.
Almost having like a short-term, mid-term, and long-term kind of plan around it.
Absolutely, crawl, walk, run.
Especially in today's economy where, marketers aren't getting sign-offs on bigger budgets, right? They're being asked to do more with less. It's so important now to show the bottom line and how it's impacting the bottom line. I think this is a good way to kind of get there.
Yeah, I will say though, to that point, that's where I think the uniqueness of all of this today is that it's new. And it's new for everyone. So partnerships become incredibly important. Partnerships with media vendors, with tech vendors, with our agency, where we will offer ourselves up, which, for an old legacy CPG brand like Colgate, it's not typical, but we'll offer ourselves up and say, you want to test it, you want to beta it, how can we do this with you? How can we get our hands dirty and figure this out together? And so I find that's often a way to get multiple stakeholders involved with various budgets as well.
And how have you seen kind of the dynamics of that? I know I keep going on this, but more so around when you go and kind of say, I want to go test this new thing, sometimes partners will take it like, oh no, they're going to, find something or do something. Have you seen that it's changed a little bit over the past 5-10 years?
I think it has. I think there's a real willingness and enthusiasm for collaboration in new spaces. I think at the end of the day, when you have a really strong partnership in place, I think that's hugely important, that you kind of get the willingness to collaborate there, and I think they want to succeed in these new spaces as much as we do. And it also, if we're talking specifically about agencies, for example, it's something if they can learn with us, they can bring it to other clients too. That's okay.
Sure. I want to open it up. I hope we have 3 minutes left, right? Yeah, 2 minutes left, so a couple of questions.
When it comes to your omni-channel media strategy, do you lean more towards consistency or customization by channel?
Good question. I would say right now we're probably still in the consistency camp across the majority of our brands. We have some exceptions in some markets where we are a little bit more leaning towards customization per channel, and I think that's where we want to head towards. Now, obviously, with some control in mind, not going crazy with thousands of CTV assets, for example. But I think if we can do it in a structured and thoughtful manner, we do want to get towards personalization, essentially. And that's personalization per person, but also for the channel you're in. I mentioned Creative X and our Creative Golden Rules. One of the things we've done is we've customized our Golden Rules by channel. So we are starting to move in that direction.
Just curious, what role influencers and social plays in your overall strategy? Like just at a high level, how do you think about that capability or asset?
They're important. They're absolutely important to us. And we think about them, we think of them as partners and as a channel in their own right, in a sense, depending on where they are on the influencer scale. But social is hugely important for us, and influencers and creators also increasingly important. Again, varies by brand, so we have a skin health group, and in beauty and skin, of course, influencers are very influential and can drive a lot of business for us. And so we have really close relationships there. In pet care, similar, right? But in oral care, maybe less so, but there we lean into the professional a lot. So dentists are our influencers. And we find that, interestingly, I think the other aspect for us is we do have a professional in each of our categories. So we have vets that we work closely with for our pet care. We have dermatologists that we work closely with in our skin health group. And we have oral care, dentists and oral care professionals that we work closely with. But we're increasingly finding that, again, the barriers come down really between consumers and professionals. They're all on TikTok. So it is important to us, and it's important for us to reach them, and we can often leverage them.
And Snap, right?
Yes, sorry. Yes, they're all on Snap. By the way, Snap is the only way that I communicate with my teenage nieces. Hi.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Kenview. Nice to meet you. When it comes to first-party data, have you had challenges in getting your brands to be excited about first-party data and proving out the value of it as it relates to, in comparison to third-party data, which we know is super valuable? And that's a U.S.-specific question. Outside of the U.S., like in EMEA and APAC, like what are some of the ways you've navigated having the first-party data conversation with them?
So to answer the first part of the question, yes. Oh my God, yes. It's been a long road. And we can do it in a couple of ways. We have the conversation both in the US and Europe, where we talk about the deprecation of the cookie, what that means to our media and our ability to target, and ultimately what that will mean if we continue to depend on that and the cookies go away where we're left, right? So you try to put that scare tactic in front of the marketers. Doesn't always work because, of course, rightfully so, they're like, well, this is my P&L today, and you want me to spend how much money to acquire Wiki data to do exactly what now, because I'm not selling my product directly to consumers. So it has been a battle, and we've had to go slowly, and we've had to start with real use cases, and we've had to fight for the testing money, and we've had to work with our agencies to say, okay, look what happens when we put a leg box on the site. Now, for some of our brands, Colgate.com, for instance, we were lucky in that we have huge, unbelievable traffic to that site, because when people Google or think about their oral care, they get sent to our site. We have a lot of scientific articles, dental articles, etc. And so we started to say, look, let's just start by taking advantage of the traffic that's coming. Let's see what happens. And we saw people starting to sign up for more information, and we saw that as we started to communicate with them, that they were responsive. And then we could start to understand, okay, how can we now track that back to a business value? We started to include CRM in our MMMs to put an ROI against it and understand halo effects. So we were able to do these little incremental things, and it has been, I don't want to say a battle, but it's been a challenge, and we've had to really prove it out, and it's taken us a couple of years, and I think we're finally there where we are starting to see the machine churn now, where we think about retargeting off of our zero-party data, getting it to the one-key place so we can start to target against it, personalize messages against it, and then ultimately see the ROI return. And now the marketers are like, oh, I get it now. Okay, let's do more of that. So, and once you get one market, we're able to really scale that, because the great thing I will say about our organization, I don't know if others have this as well, but we have a really nice competitive spirit, where if one market is doing it and we showcase it out to everyone else is like, oh, why are we not doing that? I want to do that too. Like, I want to get that, that glow of success as well. So in a very nice way, I will say. So we've had to really leverage that in order to gain the traction that we need to push it forward.
I think we're good.
Great, yes, that's it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Bobby.